be sure to check out Rob Plays. There you can hang out with me while we play video games and talk about life stuff. So with Luke Cage's Netflix series premiering in the next 3 days or so, what I want to do here is take the next couple of days and kind of provide some emphasis on Luke Cage. Of course, I do want to have a discussion, I guess later to the end of this week, on how to kill Luke Cage, and I'm pretty sure they'll cover that in the TV show, but I think it'd be a cool discussion to have here on my channel too. But I want to kick this off by running over the 4-issue inaugural series of Power Man and Iron Fist by David Walker. Now, what's really funny about this is it comes out as part of All New, All Different Marvel, but again, like most of Marvel's titles, it's not all new and it's not all different. But David Walker does take certain liberties, and he does a very good job at it. Historically speaking, both Luke Cage and Danny Rand have a very lengthy history in Marvel Comics. Of course, I have a video on Luke Cage Explained, and I have a video on Danny Rand Iron Fist Explained, and you're welcome to check both of those out. You'll find them down in the description. But to kind of provide a little bit of backstory here, Luke Cage was created as a byproduct of blaxploitation in the 1970s. And blaxploitation was a cultural phenomenon, during the 1970s that was designed to create content geared towards African Americans, and really only African Americans. They were African American films that were directed and starred African Americans, produced by African Americans. But the problem is blaxploitation was not a long-term trend. Much like a lot of things that come and go in society, blaxploitation more or less went the way of the dodo. And the result was that the reason for individuals to read Luke Cage, the reason for readers to tap into Luke Cage, was basically gone, because there wasn't really a way to make him a compelling character, at least at the time anyway, when you were faced with such popular characters and teams like Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, the X-Men, the Avengers, Captain America, so on and so forth. And so as time progressed, Luke Cage's comics began to slump in sales. Now around this time, Danny Rand the Iron Fist was created, and Iron Fist suffered from much the same problem, except that Danny Rand was designed to be a way to tap into the Hollywood concept of Americans learning Kung Fu, just because of how popular Kung Fu was at the time, most notably with regards to Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris and, different forms of martial arts in Hollywood films. But Danny Rand was much the same way. Because of the fact that popularity in Kung Fu movies began to fade, Danny Rand went with it. And so it got to the point where neither of these characters could hold their own title. And so in truth, I would go as far as to say that Marvel caught lightning in a bottle. And the reason why is because under the writing of Mary Jo Duffy, Marvel rolled both characters over into a singular series called Power Man and Iron Fist. Now, this basically took the premise of Luke Cage's character as being a hero for hire, which is to say a person who would solve people's problems for payment, and transformed it into a concept for both himself and Danny Rand. And so instead of being a superhero team in the traditional sense, they were basically detectives, and they would go around using their street level contacts, and they would solve street level crimes. You'd never see them save the world or anything like that. It was just small time stuff. But because of the comedy that Mary Jo Duffy threw into the series, it resonated with a lot of fans, and Power Man and Iron Fist proved itself to be an extremely popular series, running for I think around 125 issues. But the issue is that Marvel was gearing towards darker content, especially in 1971 after the death of Gwen Stacy. It was time to start moving into more realistic territory with stories. And so under the direction of editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, Mary Jo Duffy was basically removed from the title because she wasn't doing what she was told, more or less. She wasn't making the stories dark like Marvel wanted her to. They replaced her with Kurt Busiek, but he did the exact same thing. He kept the stories lighthearted and fun, and fans loved it. But in the end, under the writing of Christopher Priest, Danny Rand was killed off, and the story was effectively canceled. Now following this, Luke Cage just kind of fell down the rabbit hole, to be quite frank. He hit every weird story and every bad piece of writing on the way to the bottom. And it was kind of a shame to see, because he was such a prominent character. He was given solo series, which in turn were canceled, that led to more solo series, and those solo series were canceled, and it happened over and over and over and over again. It wasn't until the mid-2010s, when Marvel launched the Mighty Avengers, the second iteration, that Luke Cage got his own Avengers team. And this is where he really stood out, because by this point, there had been, another run of Power Man and Iron Fist, but it paled in comparison to the run of Mary Jo Duffy. And in the end, having Luke Cage running his own team proved to be wildly successful. But what David Walker does here is he seems to ignore all that stuff. There doesn't really seem to be any reference whatsoever to Luke Cage's time leading the New Avengers, or leading the Mighty Avengers. Instead, it looks as though he simply just picks up from Power Man and Iron Fist Volume 2. And the reason why I say that is because once we, as we get into this, of course, Luke Cage and Danny Rand are hanging out. And the question that everybody's asking, the question that his wife Jessica Jones is asking, is whether or not, Heroes for Hire is coming back again. And Luke Cage's answer is no. And this is really just kind of David Walker playing with us, sort of setting up the stage and you know, injecting a little bit of humor here. But for those of you guys who don't know, you know, Luke Cage and Jessica Jones got together during Brian Michael Bendis' series Alias, which was the original appearance, the first appearance of Jessica Jones as part of Marvel Max, which was Marvel's adult-oriented lineup. And that's where you saw, you know, the introduction of the Purple Man. That was largely what the Jessica Jones Netflix series was based off of. But, you know, by the time that series came to an end, Luke Cage and Jessica Jones had become an item. I don't remember whether or not they actually got married, although I believe they did. Of course, we know that they produced a child, and Jessica Jones had kind of been in the background of Marvel Comics ever since. But she's still very much a very, I guess, an important person in Luke Cage's life. And she, you know, that's shown here in David Walker's writing. But with Danny Rand, he's the comedic half. Luke Cage is kind of the muscle and the serious tone. Danny Rand's the funny side. And Danny Rand, of course, is making jokes, you know, tell Jessica Jones, you know, I said what's up, different things like that. But what David Walker does, and he kind of brings us back a little bit to the history, saying that, you know, Iron Fist and Luke Cage have a history together. But this again is where I say he seems to be ignoring a lot of the Mighty Avengers stuff, because he directly references their time together as heroes for hire, but he doesn't reference anything else. But what happens is the two of them are traveling to the local prison in order to pick up a girl named Jenny. At least I believe it's pronounced Jenny. It's Jhennie, I think it is. I can't remember exactly how you spell it. It's written in the comics. But the fact remains here that she had recently been released from prison. And this is yet again David Walker referencing Power Man and Iron Fist, because Jenny was a secretary, basically. Jenny Royce was a secretary for the Heroes for Hire organization, but she had fallen into a relationship with a crime boss, or not really a crime boss, with a small-time criminal. And the result was that he had beat her, and she ended up killing him. And when she was, at least argued that she was framed, you know, of course, the guy had been killed with his own gun and her fingerprints were on it. And so she was sentenced to prison. But Danny Rand and Luke Cage are here to welcome her back to the world of the free and to get her acclimated to her regular life. But what they end up doing is they end up transitioning to a place called Excelsior Diner, of course, named after the infamous catchphrase of Stan Lee. And Jenny tells them that there is a necklace that belonged to her grandmother that had been taken by a man named Lonnie Lincoln. Now, Lonnie Lincoln is a long-standing villain in Marvel Comics, and he's actually a very low-level villain. He's very, very street level. He's a guy named Tombstone. He just runs a criminal empire. He's a less stellar version of Kingpin, if that makes any sense to you guys. But in the end, Jenny basically makes the case that her necklace had been taken as payment for money that her former boyfriend owed. And the issue is that with him being dead, this necklace has been taken, and she wants to see if Luke Cage and Iron Fist will get that necklace back for her. And so this is basically David Walker kind of setting up, you know, the reuniting of Iron Fist and Luke Cage, you know, as a team working together once again. But again, we also get a few funny moments here and there. You know, for example, Luke Cage starts saying things like fiddle faddle instead of swearing, which swearing is a well-known aspect of his character. And we kind of get a flashback to both Jessica Jones and Luke Cage spending time with their daughter, and she's just kind of cussing up a storm. And so Jessica says that Luke needs to watch his language around their daughter, because her daughter is basically learning bad words from him. And so he, instead of, you know, using swear words, he's just saying things like fiddle faddle and knick-knack, paddywhack, and It's kind of nonsensical, but what ends up happening is Luke Cage and Danny Rand travel to the office, or I guess to the home of Lonnie Lincoln. And what they say is, of course, they don't mention Jenny by name in order to keep her protected, but they simply offer the case that Jenny's basically said that, Lonnie Lincoln is in possession of a necklace that belongs to her as payment for, debts that her dead boyfriend owed. And Luke Cage and Danny Rand are there to get the necklace back. Now, what we learn is that, according to Lonnie himself, the necklace was never taken as a debt that was owed. Instead, the necklace was acquired through, as legitimate means as you can get when you're part of a criminal empire. But the fact remains that with Lonnie seeming to indicate that he's taken offense to the fact that Luke Cage is calling him a liar and Luke Cage is calling him a thief, in the end, he sicks all of his men on both Luke Cage and Iron Fist. Now, of course, they're able to take them all out. It's really not a great big huge scenario here. There's a little bit of battle in and out, and of course, we see Luke Cage's signature statement of "Sweet Christmas," which I really hope they have in the Netflix series. And I really hope you guys put that down in the comment section. But in the end, this is really just kind of showing us, the two of them getting into some nonsense, kind of getting into skirmishes, different things like that. But they end up getting, once they defeat all the guys, Lonnie basically says that, hey, look, like that necklace is not just a regular necklace. That necklace has power. Now, we're not initially told what power this necklace has or what value, what significance the necklace has. We simply just pick up with Danny Rand and Luke Cage once they leave and they travel back to the Sisters of Mercy house, which is basically a halfway house for those individuals who are released from prison and trying to make their way back into normal society. You guys will have noticed that in the Netflix series, it's been featured several times. I think Night Nurse has paid several visits to the Sisters of Mercy house. But what ends up happening here is Ginny basically cries a little bit and says, hey, thank you so much. I'm glad you brought this back. But then we actually learn that there are some ulterior motives here. The first is we switch to Lonnie Lincoln, who says that the necklace is actually the Super Soul Stone. Now, again, we don't really know what that is right now. We'll find out here in the next little bit. But we also learn that Ginny had been tricking Iron Fist and Luke Cage, that she had duped them into acquiring the necklace for her. And this necklace had been acquired for Ginny on behalf of a girl named Mariah Dillard. Now, Mariah Dillard is a character that will appear in the Netflix series, which I'm actually really excited about. And I hope they show her original appearance as a crime boss, because the reason why is when she first showed up in Marvel Comics as a criminal and an enemy of Luke Cage and Iron Fist, what she was doing in one of the most genius schemes that I've ever heard of in my life, but what she was doing is she basically stole an ambulance. She was impersonating an ambulance driver, and then she began driving around, picking up the bodies of the deceased, and then robbing them of their valuables, and then just dropping their bodies off. Like, I mean, I know it's a terrible thing to do, but it's actually not unintelligent. It's actually pretty smart. It's I don't mean to say you guys should do that, you know, but in any event, you know, it's one of those weird circumstances. What we do here is we pick up, you know, with issue number 2. And with issue number 2, we have, of course, Lonnie Lincoln kind of freaking out. We have Henry Reaper, we have a guy named Reaper, and it's basically everybody learning that Lonnie Lincoln had lost this necklace, but they're being informed by Lonnie Lincoln, or at the very least by his henchmen, that he wants the necklace back, and to take care of take care of Luke Cage and Iron Fist by any means necessary. And so it's essentially an SOS going out to everybody to do whatever they need to do to take out, you know, the heroes for hire. Now, this is simply just designed to show us the various villains that we'll likely see the heroes for hire going against over the course of their publication history under the writing of David Walker, however long his tenure on this title may be. But again, this isn't necessarily a huge deal. It shows us a little bit of premonition, but for the most part, the story largely focuses on Ginny and Mariah. And what we do is we pick up with Ginny and Mariah themselves, and they're just kind of talking to their various contacts, or being informed that Lonnie Lincoln's looking for the necklace, and so they're kind of being given a heads up, more or less. But we end up transitioning back to the Excelsior Diner, and we join Luke Cage and Iron Fist. Now, a funny thing about this is he asks, you know, Iron Fist why he's wearing that mask to the superhero diner, because I mean, they're street level criminals, they're street level heroes. Most everybody knows who they are, but the mask isn't really necessary. You know, it's just one of those funny things, you know, it's basically David Walker kind of drawing attention to the idea of heroes wearing masks, despite the fact that everybody knows who they are, you know, different things like that. Like when Batman, you know, wears this costume while he's talking to Dick Grayson, different things like that. But the fact remains here that Iron Fist makes the case that they should get back together. Now, Luke Cage is adamantly against this, and this makes sense. For Luke Cage, he's got a family, you know, he's got a wife, he's got a daughter, he has those individuals to look out for. You know, despite the fact that he has unbreakable skin, it doesn't mean that he cannot be killed. And so in order to keep them safe, he's simply doing this as a one-time favor for Ginny. And then after that, he's basically going to call it quits. But the case the case that Iron Fist makes is that there's been a long history of heroes for hire. You know, they have had huge roles, and this is again where David Walker is really just tapping into the Power Man and Iron Fist history and leaving everything out. What he basically says, you know, I guess what, you know, Iron Fist does is he points to characters like Colleen. He points to characters like Misty Knight, you know, characters who had taken up the mantle of heroes for hire in their stead, albeit with Luke Cage and Iron Fist coming in periodically. And in the argument of Iron Fist, what he's saying is, you know, Luke Cage can't simply just leave that legacy gone. He can't leave that legacy vacated. People have to stand up for it, that they have something to stand for. And so what we end up doing here is we basically run into this sort of Warriors kind of scenario. And what I mean is that for those of you guys who saw the film Warriors, it was one of those movies that was, you know, rooted in 80s culture, things like that. But the Warriors was a gang that was framed for the murder of a Grand Poobah, you know, boss. And it was basically all the gangs that were trying to track them down, and they ran into each gang on the way back to, you know, on the way to prove their innocence. With Luke Cage and Iron Fist, it's much the same way. They're being tracked down by all these different gangs, and they're fighting them off as best they can. can, which they've, you know, largely been successfully able to do. But then they're encountered by Gorilla Man. Now, Gorilla Man is a guy who, again, is a very street level criminal, along with Black Tarantula. As you guys notice, they probably have really, really goofy names, and it's designed to be that way. Power Man and Iron Fist is not designed to be a super serious title. This is designed to be something, you know, enjoyable, fun, and a little bit nonsensical here and there. But Gorilla Man is a guy with super strength, and he uses it for that very purpose. He's really just designed to be kind of like the antithesis to Luke Cage on the street level. And so while Gorilla Man and Tarantula Man, and while, you know, Iron Fist and Luke Cage, while they all get into a major skirmish, they're actually watched by Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, and they're watched by Gwen Stacy. And this is the funny thing here, because they're just watching all this go down. They're just watching things happen. And this is one of the greatest things about this story. This is why I love this story so much, because one of the, you know, with Luke Cage and Iron Fist being a street level team, they're working together. It's still very well known. They're extremely well known in the superhero community. And so, you know, Jessica Drew and Spider-Gwen know they can handle themselves. It's just, wow, are they really back together again? Like, it really seems like they're back together again. And that's basically all they're doing. They're just looking at everything and they're like, wow, they're back together again. That's cool. You know, and they're kind of taking videos and different things like that, but it's just one of those funny moments that's kind of being injected into this. But again, you know, Iron Fist and Luke Cage more or less just duke it out with Gorilla Man, and they're able to hold their own. You know, it's not really a super in-depth discussion here. But what ends up happening is, of course, again, as we continue our story, we end up with Luke Cage and Iron Fist traveling back to the Sisters of Redemption halfway house, and they want to ask questions. The question is, why is Lonnie Lincoln in such hot pursuit of this necklace? You know, if he wanted, you know, if it was stolen, if it was simply a stolen necklace, he would just let it go. It really wouldn't be worth it. But the necklace must have some kind of meaning or some kind of value if they're searching after it that hard. And so what we end up doing is we transition back to Jenny and Mariah. And what we learn is that in order for the Super Soul Stone to be used, the person has to both etch, I guess, some sort of tribal marks on their body and then utter an incantation in order to activate the stone. And that's exactly what happens. After learning about how it works, Jenny begins to, or I guess she draws various, you know, what appear to be tattoos. She has various artifacts drawn on her arms and all over her body, and she utters the incantation, and then her body mutates into some variation, or I guess maybe seems to absorb this Super Soul Stone. We don't really know exactly what it means, but that brings it into this video, guys. Let me know down in the comments section what you guys think about Power Man and Iron Fist. It's a little weird, to be honest. You know, it's kind of a strange direction to take, but again, you know, the story's designed to be this way. The story's designed to deal with street level heroes getting into weird things, you know, things that just seems strange that normal superheroes just wouldn't take the time to look at. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps, and yeah, I will catch you guys later. Peace.